Hello, my name is Wyatt Bright, and I will be doing my presentation over cognitive maps. The term cognitive maps was first coined by Edward Tolman in 1948 during a study on rats' ability to accomplish mazes. Tolman discovered that the rats would learn details about the mazes and shortcuts even when there was no reward given for doing so. And when obstacles were put in the way, cutting off previously known routes, they still found ways to the reward, which led him to believe that the brain is able to create a spatial recreation of the maze within the mind. We now know today that cognitive maps are able to create complex recreations of every environment that we experience, and the brain is also able to store the recreation for long periods of time. An important part of understanding cognitive maps is to understand that heuristics play an important role in their creation. Heuristics are a generalization turned into a problem-solving strategy that will typically create a correct solution, but sometimes will not. Some heuristics that are used in creating cognitive maps include the number of cities that lie between 2 points on a map, if one point fits into a similar category as another location on the map, and whether one point is a landmark. In a study on cognitive maps and distance, Thorndike had participants look at a map with cities on it until they could precisely create a cognitive map of the area. Then they would be asked about the distance between two cities on the map. If the 2 points had cities that would fall in between them, it would skew the perceived distance of the 2 points. If there were no cities lying in between, then the participants would remember the points as closer than they actually were. And for each number of cities that lied in between, then the distance between those 2 points asked would get larger, skewed larger. Research shows that people distort distance when the points relate to other locations in a cognitive map. In a different study done by Hurdle and Mascolo, they had participants learn the layout of a town, learning specific locations on the map. Then when asked about distance between locations, the participants would shift each location closer to other places on the map that would fit into similar category. For instance, they would remember that the courthouse is close to places like the police station, since they fit into a similar category, and would base the distance as similar to it being by the police station, though it was not actually. Finally, when talking about distance, people skew distances in cognitive maps when one of the points is a landmark. For instance, when asking people to travel from the capital of a state to a city that is 45 minutes away, people will typically say that it takes less time to travel if they were going from that other city to the capital. That would take the same amount of distance if they were traveling from the capital to that away city. Next, when talking about shapes in cognitive maps, there are also 3 common heuristics that create distortions. First is the 90-degree angle heuristic, where people will generalize all angles to be close to 90 degrees. Even if they know for sure that that is not a 90-degree angle, they will estimate it as being closer to 90 degrees than it actually is. The next is the rotation heuristic, in which people will rotate a cognitive map that is slightly tilted and remember it as a vertical or horizontal image. For instance, California, which sits tilted on the map, is typically thought of as vertical, and so people will tend to think that San Diego, a city that is in the southeastern part of the state, they will think that it's closer than the city of Reno in Nevada, even though it is actually farther west than San Diego is. The third heuristic is the alignment heuristic, where people will align different parts of a cognitive map as though they are along the same latitudinal line. This can be seen when asking people to think of which city is more north, Philadelphia in the US or Rome in Italy. People will say Philadelphia because when you put the US and Europe next to each other, Philadelphia is in the northeastern part of the country, while Rome is in the southern part of Europe. Whereas in reality, Rome is much farther north than Philadelphia. In the study on the development of cognitive maps for spatial navigation in 7 to 10-year-olds, researchers looked at the age at which the use of cognitive maps in children begins. The researchers took 97 children from the ages of 7 to 10 and also had 26 adults play the video game that would test participants in reaching a location as quickly as possible. The researchers worked off of the landmark route survey model, in which people first create stereotypes of the environment in serial order and then store information about landmarks in the environment. Then the movements of the person is registered in respect to the landmarks, which create the basis for memorizing routes to landmarks that are not seen. And finally, the route information is stored in a survey-like representation of the entire environment. The study found that children 7 to 8 years old perform much poorer than adults, and that children at 9 years old perform much better than those at 7 to 8. Though the 9-year-olds are not quite as fast as the adults, results show that this is the age in which cognitive maps begin to develop, and children 7 to 8 are still using pathway finding strategies. The children at 9 were able to easily find shortcuts and develop new routes, while those at 7 to 8 had trouble doing so. The researchers also proposed that by the age of 12, children are able to perform cognitive map tests very similarly to adults. The researchers suggest that more testing should be done in natural environments rather than a virtual one, and that there needs to be more testing done to know when specifically cognitive maps begin to form and when they begin to be used. In conclusion, the first testing on cognitive maps was done in 1948 by Edward Tolman on rats' ability to complete mazes. A cognitive map is the ability for a person to create a virtual map of their environment and to understand relation of things that are out of sight. There are a number of heuristics that affect our ability to create cognitive maps, including landmarks, how many cities fall between 2 points on a map, and the rotation of a map. And in regards to when cognitive maps begin to develop, researchers have found they initially begin at 9 years old, but will continue to develop up into young adulthood. Thank you.